the first Trans-America automobile trip from San Francisco to New York was taken, not on this day, it was last week, but taken by Horatio Jackson and Sewall Crocker. It took 63 days, 12 hours, and 30 minutes. We're going to ask Valerie about what her husband did and how long that took. But anything, he took along a Kodak camera, which we had a good conversation about a couple weeks ago, and also a dog. He did that in a 1903 Winton touring car. And Ken Burns' documentary, Horatio Drive for PBS, was done. However, that seems to me like such small potatoes, and yes, I eat too many potatoes, compared to another race, or more specifically, a rally called Peking to Paris. And that was a motor race, or like I said, it was really a rally. Originally held, let me check the years here. Okay, that was 1903. This one is started in 1907. So that makes Valerie pretty old if her husband was, oh no, her husband wasn't in the 1907. He was in a different one. But it started in Peking, now Beijing, and ended in Paris, France, a distance of 9,317 miles. That just sounds so wonderful, romantic, and exciting. I'm envious of your husband, Valerie, and I'm envious of you for knowing him. But the idea for that race did come from a Paris newspaper on July 31st in that same year, reading, "What needs to be provided today is that as long as man has a car, he can do anything and go anywhere." Today, that would have to include women, but that was back then, and you know what I mean. And then asks the question in this magazine, in this publication, is there anyone who will undertake to travel this summer from Peking to Paris by automobile? So the race started from the French embassy in then Peking on June the 10th, 1907, and I know the winner, you want to know, is Scapponi. Did I say that right? Scapponi Borghese. And he arrived in Paris on August 10th, 1907. And we're lucky enough to have Valerie Vandesilver with us. And we're going to ask her about what she knows about that race. But first, I want Valerie just to introduce herself and tell us about her. So go ahead, Valerie, and the rest of the show we'll get going with. So take care.
Hi, my name is Valerie Vandesilver. I've known Jay for a long time, and quite frankly, it's been a pleasure. And some of you may not know, at one time he was a class president at Cal State Fullerton. So he has a bit of a political career, as well as he's had his moments of fame in college. You can imagine that. And we've worked together, and it's been a pleasure. And I'm so excited to be on this show today for a lot of reasons. We've tried to get together and set a time when we could catch up and do something with you, the audience. And I'm really excited to be with you today and hope that you'll gain something from what we share and the time we spend together.
Okay. So we're going to get more specifically into your contributions to that and how people can get a hold of you. But give us a quick, before we get into business, give us a quick rundown on that, what your husband did.
So it's interesting. My husband was born and raised in the Netherlands, in Holland. And when he was in high school and college, he and his best friend, whose name is Harry Jurgens, used to drive to the south of France, drive around and ask if anyone knew anyone who had old cars, specifically Citroens or Bentleys. And someone would say, oh yeah, the farmer down the street has one, or the farmer over here, or go over there to that guy. And they literally would find farmers who had these old cars in their barns. Peter and Harry would buy them, drive them back to Holland, and resell them.
Now, which one is your husband?
My husband is Peter.
Peter, okay.
So sometimes this would happen when Peter's parents were gone, and they'd make a mess of the front lawn and painting the car, and then they'd mow the lawn, and the parents would come home as though nothing happened, except the neighbors, of course, always told on them. So this story goes on that Peter and Harry, how I met them is they visited the United States. They worked for a wealthy Dutch architect who had some investments in the United States. They visited a new home community where I was selling in Newport Beach. And Peter had a beard down to his waist, and Harry was the one that talked all the time. So Peter didn't talk to me for a long time. But they did a lot of business in the United States over about a 2.5 year period. And when they did, we became buddies. We kind of became the Three Musketeers. So when Harry was here alone, we did stuff together. When Peter was here alone, we did stuff together. When they were both here, we all three did stuff together. And eventually Harry got married, and Peter was the one who transacted all the business as they wrapped it up. So they stayed friends. They're about as close as brothers could be without being brothers. And a few years ago, Peter came home from work one day, and at this time he was working for the world's largest bond trading firm, and some of you will know who that was without mentioning their name, in Newport Beach, California. And the man who ran that firm was at that time called the king of the bond funds. Peter came home from work one day and said, "Did Harry call you today?" I said, "No."
He's trying to see if somebody else told you.
No, why would Harry call me? Well, so Harry knew about this road rally called Peking to Paris, and it were two people in every car. You had to have a driver and you had to have a navigator. So Harry had a navigator who had to cancel, and he had to get a new navigator, because if he didn't have one by a certain date, he couldn't go on the rally, because you have to get visas and passports for all the countries that you're going through. So this was a trip that was going to take 5 weeks, 10,000 miles, and over through 13 countries. So Peter said, "What do you think?" Well, this company that he worked for at the time would match funds that you gave to charity. So we said, what a great idea. Peter had a friend at this firm who had Parkinson's. And I said, why don't we do something for, I want to say his name was JP, and we'll raise money for every mile you drive, blah, 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 and your company will match the funds. Great idea. And Harry could raise money in London, and we could raise money here. So long story short, he had a boss at that time who said, and Peter had 10 weeks of unused vacation, so no problem. So his boss said, well, I don't care how many weeks you have of unused vacation, you can't go. So we decided that Peter made the decision that he would actually leave his job of now 20 years to go on this trip. So we couldn't raise money because we couldn't let anybody know that he intended to leave his job, which then it was about 4 months later, he kept it quiet and resigned 2 weeks before he left. When he walked in his office to resign, everyone had been told by that time that he would have decided to resign. And when he walked in, all of his coworkers stood up and cheered for him, and they watched him throughout the rally. So what happened is that they had a 1926 Buick, and here's a coffee table book that we have of their trip, which was pretty exciting.
Oh, wow.
And they drove, so there were about 100 old cars, and the number of your car was based on how old your car was. So they were the 16th oldest car. Oh. And they left from the Great Wall in China, drove 5 weeks to Paris, and it was just an amazing adventure. I went with them to Beijing because I thought, what if something happens? We had elderly parents. What if something happens that they don't make it to Paris? I would never know what the experience was like. So I wanted to go with them, which I did. I saw them off in Beijing. I saw them off the Great Wall, and off they went. I have never cried so hard in my entire life because my husband is very, very, very quiet, as Jay knows. And I thought, if he's brave enough to leave his job and go on this trip, having absolutely no idea where he's going, I said, I'm afraid he'll never come back.
Oh, wow.
Driving, and he's going to keep going.
Wow.
So, but I was fortunate he did come back. So let me show you his car as they're driving through Mongolia, which is known as the land of the blue skies. This is them, and there's 1926 Buick, and I think there you can see
Wow.
how they looked. It was an amazing trip.
I'll say.
Fortunately, they had a GPS on the bottom of their car, so we could follow them. But driving through the Mongolian desert where there were no roads and they were literally driving through the sand, sometimes it would show that they hadn't even left their previous destination, but they were already at the next one. So Harry's wife was in London. She followed it in her time zone. I followed it in mine. And it was quite an adventure for us as well as it was for them.
That is a great adventure. Even thinking about it is a great adventure. You know, I don't know if everybody is familiar with what a rally actually is. And tell me if this was any different, Valerie, but you go in sections. And you have to get to the end of that section at a specific, not just time, but a specific second. Is that correct?
That's correct. So actually their time trials were at the end of every day. But the other part of this is that for the first part of the rally, they stayed in tents and yurts and wherever they stayed, depending on they were going through the desert.
Right.
Towards the end of the rally, they were in more civilized countries and they stayed in hotels. But whoever got there first got the wine that was set aside for the day. So there were a lot of reasons to get to the end of the day first. But of course, the newer cars tended to get there a little faster than the 1925 Buick did. So
yeah. Now, when I did my one measly little rally, it was not exactly who got there first, but who got there at the assigned time they were supposed to get there.
That's right.
And you couldn't just drive there by looking at a map then, or a GPS, or your navigation now, because it wasn't a straightforward trip. You were given clues as to where to turn and where not to turn and that kind of thing.
And they had some of that. So when they left Beijing, they had, I keep wanting to say Peking, but it's not. When they left Beijing, they had a book, literally a 3-ring binder, and it told them where they were supposed to go. And most, as I said, later on they had roads, but going through China and Mongolia, they literally had no roads. And in this book are just some phenomenal pictures of them literally driving through the dirt or through waters or rivers or creeks or whatever.
Wow.
Having no idea really where they were going next. It's quite an exciting adventure.
And a lot of us live our lives like that, but you know, it's. I mean, that just sounds like such a great thing to do or to have done. And I guess it's never too late, right? We could still do that. They still have that, correct?
They do. You know, I heard, I think it was Buzz Aldrin or one of the astronauts saying, after you've been to the moon, there's nothing else to talk about. You come home and people, you go to a cocktail party, people say, you know, what did you do today? Oh, I walked on the moon. And some of those experiences are just something that it's so beyond being able to explain. And I've got this amazing book that I can look at. And I heard, he would call me, but the first time he called me, I said, how are you? And he said, I'm so cold and I'm so dirty and I'm so cold and I'm so dirty. So those are just experiences that could never replace. How could I ever take that away from him?
No, nobody can. And, I don't think either one of us, him and he included, are going to be walking on the moon anytime soon.
Probably.
Although when I was a kid and the moonshot was done, and I know we had pretty much a whole show on the moonshot and things like that, I really thought that by the age I am now, I'd be going on vacations to the moon and to Mars.
Yeah.
And I ain't got that, so I'm upset about that. But I can still do what you just mentioned. And it just, life is short, but you gotta once in a while do things that part of you says don't, but you know that you need to, right?
That's right. Now, Jay, I don't know if all of your listeners know how much you love trains, but some of them have been your friends for a long time. Think about the train trips you've taken and what a joy those are and what an experience to travel that way. So cut yourself short. You've done some fun things too.
Oh yeah, and then I do brag about being in jail in 3 different countries and things like that. And my wife is getting so tired of hearing about that. But yeah, there's a few things I can brag about, or or have. But yeah, I love the trains. I used to go. We used to go to New York a lot just for a fix of the music and this and that, and sometimes for business. And it would be fly one way and get a room on the train coming back. So, yeah, it's great. And then some of the other, like, we can talk about trains more as we get. But, as we're getting older, too, there might be somebody out there saying, well, at your age, looking themselves in the mirror or looking at me, at your age, you probably shouldn't be doing things like that. But I know you've got you've got an opinion about that.
It's interesting that a few years ago, as I started I'd have to go to urgent care because I didn't have a primary physician. So if I got a sore throat, I'd go into the urgent care and the doctor would say, and who's your primary physician? I would say, well, tonight you are. They'd look at me like, don't you have one? I said, no. And so you'd say, well, at your age, you really should have one. And then I went to another doctor for something like, well, at your age, or you go to the dentist and at your age. And so I was at a conference actually last year in Dallas, and a lady was talking to me, and I said, I'd love to have my own show, my own radio show or podcast or something. I said, but the only thing that I can think of is what everybody keeps saying to me is, at your age. And she said, that's what I do, you should do one. So I won't steal that from you, but I think that's a better name than what I have on this show. But I think that's so important to talk about because we ain't done yet, no matter how old. I don't think you're as old as I am, but almost nobody is. But we ain't done yet. And I think that we're going to live longer than we know. Even so, we may think we're old, but I think we very well could live way beyond 100. My mom, Jane, is going to be 100 October the 18th. She still drives. She goes to the grocery store, lives totally on her own, needs absolutely no help. Sometimes she walk a lot. She needs help.
And I know some other people that are like that, and I think even 10 years ago I would have doubted that a lot. But no, it is out there. The largest growing group in this country, I learned this from Susan Geffen, are the 100-year-olds, followed by the 85-year-olds. So I know we're talking a lot about great things here, but you also do work and have a business and help a lot of people in that business. And I know I'm looking at the time here. We spent a lot of time on other things, so we're going to have to, you've still got time today, but we're going to have you back because you're a lot of fun. And, but also because you know a lot. And you have a lot to offer.
Thank you.
So let's get into a little bit of part of what you were gonna start talking about. And the first thing should probably be, because you know me and I keep yapping, and I forget to ask you before the show is over how people can get a hold of you. Now, right now, they may only want to get a hold of you to hear more stories, but that's okay too.
That's okay, yeah.
So go ahead and give out all...
Let me just add one thing about the rally that is really funny. When we all got to China, and the guys had to go get driver's licenses in China. So the country of China would not give a driver's license to the oldest driver, who at that time was about 78 years old. So his navigator had to get the driver's license until they were out of the country. Then he could drive. The funny thing is, he won the rally that year, and he won again this last year. So please, at your age, you can. Now he's over 80. There you go. He's won that rally twice in the last 10 years.
Wow.
So that's my story. So getting a hold of me, I've been in the same office in Tustin, right off of the 55 freeway and 17th Street, right near the intersection of the 22, the 5, and the 57. And no, the 22, the 5, and the 55. And there's a Mimi's Cafe Plaza right here.
Let's talk food. No.
Food. My company on the building is called Silver Realty Group. I have a full service real estate brokerage. I do property management. I also manage about 50 vacation rental properties, or properties that people may rent for just 30 days at a time, that are what we would used to call corporate housing. And then I have a small mortgage company also. So we do a lot, and I'm certainly not ready to quit at any age.
Not even at your age?
Not even at my